Welcome to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions. Your host tonight is the author of the Pro-Black Compendium and Zuberi and the Maroons of Maa, the Pan-African Nationalist, Oni. Oni, what are we discussing tonight?
Peace on Cobia. Those of you who have read the Pro-Black Compendium know what I'm talking about. And those of you who listen to this podcast to the end know what I'm talking about. The answer's in front of your face. And that's what this podcast is about. How the answers to how the solution is in our face. Before we get into that, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. I want to thank you for purchasing the Pro-Black Compendium. I want to thank you for reading the Pro-Black Compendium and Zuberi and the Maroons of Maa. And I want to thank you for connecting with me on social media and letting me know that you appreciate the literature I wrote and the podcasts that I'm producing. I want to thank you for playing your part. I know a lot of you don't want to go to Amazon and patronize them to get the books in your hands, but it's the only way I know. And because of that, take one for the team. Sometimes you take one for the team. I need to get these books into as many black hands as possible. And right now, you can get free shipping if you order the Pro-Black Compendium and Zuberi and the Maroons of Maa together. Take advantage of that. Take advantage of that. Get the book for, friends, family, whatever. But we need to spread the knowledge, because unbeknownst to most of us, that book has more solutions in it than a casual reading would lend itself to. And I'm going to write, I intend to write at least 3 more books. And already 2 of those books are based off of the Pro-Black Compendium, at least. This is a foundational text, and best to get it now. But we're going to talk more about that. But like I said, I was sick. So you have to connect with me on social media so that you know what the deal is. So you know why I might not put out a podcast, or even so you can get a little teaser as to what the next podcast will be. Also, I'll be honest with you, I love seeing photos of my book. I love seeing people say, hey, look, I just purchased this book. I'm going to read it soon. Or I'm reading it now, loving it. I love seeing that, and I want more of our people to see that. So definitely connect with me on social media. I'm using Twitter mostly, and that's my name, Onitaset, Onitaset. So connect with me there, and really let's show the world that we love solutions. Let's show our people that we love solutions. And let's also be our people. You understand? And that's another clue for you. Because the answer's in your face. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm not just a new now. I'm not just a new author. Let's say, right? So I've been writing for, let's say, half a decade. Organizing, writing, all that stuff for half a decade. I wasn't really on social media like that. Mostly because I just didn't see your point. At the time, because I was writing articles, I was writing on WordPress, so you could have just came to me on WordPress, right? But one of the things I wrote, which was like a lot of my literature, a lot of it is really good stuff. Some of it is a little, outdated. But a lot of it you can technically take some bits and pieces of. One part of it, for instance, is this idea of looking at the races of people, right? And distinguishing them by the names that they call themselves, right? So let me give you an example. You know that Asian people are called Orientals, right? And Oriental simply means Easterner, okay? So then the question is, what if you're calling Asian people Orientals? Is there a word, for instance, for white people? And there happens to be one. It's Occidental, spelled like accidental, but with a O instead of an A, right? So an Occidental, roughly translated, means Westerner, right? But it's also white people. So you have Occidentals and Occidental culture, and there's Orientals and Oriental culture, or Oriental history and Occidental history, and it kind of begs the question: Orientals are east of what? Occidentals are west of what? Or even if you don't even look at it that way, you can say, well, what about black people? Now, there isn't an official word for black people, but it's pretty obvious what it would be, which would be original, because if one people are east and other people are west, then somebody's at the origin. You get what I'm saying? Like let's say you're looking at a math graph or something, one side of the x-axis is positive, next side of the x-axis is negative, then in the middle is the zero, the origin, which is neither positive nor negative, and the origin, like the Occident is Occidental and Orient is Oriental, the origin is original, right? So now this is just a bit of wordplay, right? But the wordplay kind of goes to say that the Occidental isn't original, okay? And long, like a lot of that really not useful, except to say that with the wordplay, you have to pick up on this idea that Westerners are not original. So I say this to emphasize that Westerners, right, or even Easterners, but Westerners, white people in particular, what they're doing today is, let's say when they insult you, a lot of times when they insult you, it is something it was an insult that was given to them. You see what I'm saying? Or when they compliment themselves, it's a compliment that was given to you, right? And so right now I want to point you out to a brother that I mentioned in the Pro-Black Compendium, which is Jonathan Bruce, right? And Jonathan Bruce has a quotation that he said in 1919, and I think, and it goes like this: the early Britons were once rated as the most ignorant and stupid of all races, yet 1,000 years of opportunity have given them a place among the races of mankind, second to none. Now you really have to think about that, okay? So if you study Occidental history, let's say, right, then you know that the ancient Britain, or even the ancient Anglos and the ancient Saxons, so on and so forth, were not really respectable in ancient times. They weren't regarded highly in ancient times. When people study ancient Germanic tribes, for instance, right, they say, what a bunch of savages, what a bunch of barbarians. They bury themselves, like during the winter because it's so cold, they dig holes and put feces, they dig holes and live in these holes and put feces over the holes. Can't remember if it's to detract animals. Can't remember if it's to whatever, mark, who cares? But the point is that they're living in holes and putting feces on top. This is their form of shelter. And that's, of course, another thing to bear in mind whenever you want to gain some perspective as to why white people want this social order that they have, because, as somebody else pointed out, they never want to go back into those caves, or to the cave life, or even to the life of digging holes to live in them, But just going back to this idea, these Britons were not, advanced civilization, so on and so forth. No. However, after 1,000 years of opportunity, let's say, they became the top force of the globe, particularly in 1919. But bear in mind, of course, again, that the Britain, as you would call them, would also be the quote-unquote American, ethnically speaking. And again, that's another clue as to the answers in front of you, but you might have to listen to this podcast again to pick up on what I mean. Either way, reread that. It says the early Britons were once rated as the most ignorant and stupid of all peoples, of all races. So go back, ignorant and stupid, the same things that they call you, right? And yet 1,000 years of opportunity have given them a place among the races of mankind second to none. And that's another thing to understand, that you can't predict, like if you go back 100 years, or if you go back 1,000 years, you can't predict today. Or if you go back 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 4,000 years, you can't predict today like necessarily. Now, of course, today is built upon yesterday's, of course. But you can't, nothing is to say what is next. Nothing is to say what is next. Because even if you look back, if you look at 100 years, what the world was 100 years ago isn't what it is today. And I don't want to detail too much about, but all the systems and so on and so forth, because that's a whole other conversation. But the idea is that even 100 years ago, what you see today wasn't what was then, i.e., America wasn't technically a superpower 100 years ago. You understand? Or you go back 100 years before that, it wasn't a superpower. And actually, just to clarify too, this is just a long story short, right? But let's say the sinking of the Spanish Armada is why you speak English today. You understand what I'm saying? Essentially, the once upon a time, like, part of the reason why you speak English, let's say, is because England was a naval superpower. Okay, and the reason why naval was the reason why England was a naval superpower is because Spain was no longer a naval superpower. You understand? And that was the sinking of the Spanish Armada. But again, that's just a long story short. But the whole idea is you know, the tides can change at any moment, or what is the future is not written in stone. You know, and people who assume the future, without, let's say, any divination skills, right? Like, let's just say they need to cut it out. The future isn't guaranteed. You know, the future isn't guaranteed. So let's So again, like I said, you know, you could look at the Romans and how they estimated Northern Europeans, right? For instance, there's this Roman named Pliny the Elder, right? He wrote in Natural History. He says Africans were the wisest, and Northern Europeans were the fiercest, right? Or you got this other, you know, ancient Roman named Vitruvius, in De Architectura, he writes how African people were the most sagacious and understanding, right? You have this modern French historian called Charles Seignobos, who writes in History of Ancient Civilization. He says black-skinned Africans had been the original civilizers, both in being peaceful and sedentary. Then white people overthrew them, for they were warmongering shepherds, right? And if you pay attention to the Eurasian Bible, you know, the same thing is being said. You know, the idea that the Semites overtook Hamites, you know, as warmongering shepherds, right? But that right there, you know, kind of, and this is something that if you read Occidental history with open eyes, you could see that the insults against them are now applied to you. You know, you're considered the warmongering shepherds. You get what I'm saying? And they're considered the peaceful and sedentary civilizers. You get what I'm saying? Like compliments that were applied to you being wise and sagacious, and this is like ancient opinion, right? You're suddenly, you're suddenly the ancient Europeans, and they're the ancient Africans. You get what I'm saying? And again, I just say this to emphasize that they are not original. You see, they are. So what you see as them being clever, right, is really them just copying you. You understand? And in them copying you, you see the immense success that they have. So here's something that I want to there's 3 words I want you guys to consider. Well, 4 words, right? Colonization, imperialism, tribalism, and African, right? And each of these words, particularly if you are an informed individual, let's say, right? Each of these words have a certain connotation to you, you know? So if I say, you know, the colonizers are coming, right? What are you thinking? You know, how do you feel about that? Right? If I say the imperialists are on their way, or the imperialists want to negotiate with us, right? Or the imperialists want to talk to us, what do you think is going on, right? If I say you are just a tribal individual, how do you feel if I call you a tribal? If I call you a tribe, right? And then African, right? How do you feel if I call you an African? You know? Now, if for some reason that last one, you know, if you can't accept the word of being called an African, then, you know, you might not necessarily be ready for this podcast. You know, you might have to come back to this podcast another time. But I remember when I was going to one of the organizations in Brooklyn, one of the elders was telling me, if you call a person an African on the street, he's ready to fight you. And of course, with these other words, it's kind of the same thing. If you call somebody a colonizer, that's a fighting word. You call somebody imperialist, fighting word. You call somebody a tribal or a tribesman, right? You definitely got to be ready to throw down. You know what I'm saying? And the thing is this, that these words, you have to actually look at these words, because these words are more powerful than we understand. And again, this is the part of the quote unquote cleverness of this cracker, right? Because look, when you look at the Pro-Black Compendium, you could see that colony, right? The first colony that we know of is Kemet. And the first colonizers then are the Cushitic people, the Kennesu, if you will. So in essence, colony, colonization, colonizer, those were our words. You get what I'm saying? So Kemet, it was like a marshland, right? It was virtually uninhabitable. And so ancient African people, the Kennesu, the Kush, so on and so forth, they saw this land, they said, hey, we can clear this up, a huge excavation project, and they cleared up the land and settled over there, colonized the area, and made Kemet their first colony. You see what I'm saying? So whereas you might say colonization and colonizers and all those are negative words, oh man, we have to go into the anti-colonialism, or the anti-colonial position. The reality is that your heritage was that of colonizers. And you see this even further when the other colonies are things like the ancient Indus Valley civilization, ancient China, ancient Minoa, Sumeria, Olmec, Katha. You understand? So the ancient Kushites, if you will, are forming colonies all over the world. You understand? All over the world, but you have something against colonization. And of course, that goes into the next word, imperialism, right? And that is, of course, correlated with the word empire, right? And I say the Cushitic people again, they have colonies all over the world. The sun doesn't set on the Cushitic people. And those are our ancestors, you have to understand. And that was, put in the Pro-Black Compendium. And you know this, right? So you can see that, the ancient Kushites are taking up the land, the nice fertile land all over the world. Nice river valleys in Arabia, in India, in China, in America. You understand? And you even see the big statues of these giant, colossal African men, right? African men, African women, right? You see these giant colossal statues, you see their symbols, you see pyramids everywhere in this world, because Africans are going around the world putting their image everywhere. That's imperialism. That's empire. Right? And it doesn't just stop there. There are ancient African kings who took over land in other parts of the world. And you, again, like I said, you gotta look into the Pro-Black Compendium at Taharka, Shabaka, Pianke. Look at those warrior kings that I emphasized in the book. Shabaka, Taharka, for instance, was so bad that he's in the Eurasian Bible. He's mentioned the Eurasian Bible for conquering other lands. They said this African was so great that they had to include him. They couldn't exclude him. he's one of the few real people in the book, and he's there to give the book some legitimacy. To say, oh yeah, we know about him. Oh, he was there. A real, you heard of him. You heard of him. He was there. This is what this is how you know our story got some weight to it. That's how powerful we were, right? But that's imperialism, and on the notion of imperialism, everybody, saying you're an anti-imperialist, just like saying you're an anti-colonial, sounds like you're part of the good guys. Saying you're an anti-imperialist sounds like you're a good guy, and it's actually pretty interesting because there was this white boy. This white boy is named Hilaire Belloc, right? And he is an anti-imperialist, let's say. And notice that I said anti-imperialist, not pro-black whitey, but he goes by anti-imperialist. And here's a quotation that's attributed to him. And bear in mind, this is in 1898. He says, and it's part of a poem, or it's written as a poem, but it's, whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun and they have not. Now you got to think about that, okay? I'm going to say it again. Whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun and they have not. That's it. Now, this is an anti-imperialist white person. Now, again, not pro-black, anti-imperialist, right? So in your mind, it's supposed to be the good white boy, right? But the reality is this, that this cracker got more sense than, and this is the trouble right here, because I don't want to compliment crackers. I don't want to compliment white people, but you gotta say this, that this cracker got more sense than many of the black misleaders today. And he wrote this in 1898. Because what he's saying is that the reason behind imperialism, right, or behind white imperialism, white rule, let's say, is that white people have the Maxim gun. And the Maxim gun at that time was the machine gun. You get what I'm saying? The idea was that you could give black folk, like white people can trade arms to black folk, like rifles and so on and so forth, but he couldn't get a machine gun. And in modern parlance, it's saying you could have a handgun, but you can't have an assault rifle. Or you could have a handgun or even an assault rifle, but you can't have a drone or a tank or a nuclear bomb. You understand what I'm saying? The basis that he's saying of white power at that time was that whatever happened, no matter what, all white people agreed that they would have the best weapons and Africans won't. Again, it's not even a pro-black white person. This is an anti-imperialist, quote unquote, right? Or just a white person thinking about, well, how could the situation be undone? And yet, to this day, you don't hear black folks saying anything like this, or even acknowledging this. Now, notice that I read this when I was first organizing it. This was like the first thing I was doing, like the first thing I formed, like understanding that black folk don't produce machine guns, even machine guns. Okay, it was one of the first things that I formed an organization to address over a half a decade ago. Okay, so the first things I said, look, we gotta organize for. Well, I said we gotta organize to make this dude wrong, to make this white boy wrong. But of course, you see the atmosphere out here, because again, I wasn't even on social media. I didn't even know social media was as bad as it is. I just thought, hey, look, I'm gonna put out some articles on WordPress, and you guys are gonna come find me. You know, and then years later, that wasn't the case. You know, or I thought, hey, I'm just gonna go out in the streets of Brooklyn, and I'm gonna get y'all to come to meetings, and we could discuss it in person. You know, and for those of you who know people who were at those meetings, you know that it didn't go like that. It wasn't that easy. It wasn't that easy. But the whole idea is that this white boy is going to say very clearly, over 100 years ago, you know, whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun and they have not, right? And it's really that simple. It's really that simple. You know, what you call what people are wasting your time calling. I don't want to go into that because that's I don't like that conversation. But what they call white supremacy is really just white people saying, look, we're going to have the best weapons in this world. And we're going to try to make sure that people who are not like us don't have those best weapons. But of course, there are non-whites, non-blacks who are getting those weapons because they're like, F your agenda, we get it. But of course, we don't get it. You see what I'm saying? So we, for instance, we are celebrating when South Africa lost white rule. They decommissioned their nuclear weapons, and we celebrating that as a moral victory. I'll say it again. So South Africa. Let's say for instance, you know, you say, let's say for instance, you're in war. Like some people, like somebody once wrote, you know, well, how are we gonna win a war if we don't have tanks, we don't have rifles, we don't have whatever, right? And the reality is that even if you don't have weapons, right? I can't remember what war it was, but there are wars that were fought, you know, where black people picked up the weapons that white people dropped or white people were killed with, you know, and eventually formed an army from that. You know, matter of fact, it might have been the Mau Mau, come think of it, right? But the idea is that the weapon that the loser drops becomes your weapon, becomes your game. You know what I'm saying? So white people might protect the Maxim gun. You know what I'm saying? And be like, hey, look, disassemble it if you see that our war is being lost. You know what I'm saying? Burn the pieces, destroy the pieces, blow it up. You see the war is being lost. Whatever happens, don't let these black folk get it, right? Yet, imagine this, that we get the weapon, we get the Maxim gun, we get the machine gun, we finally get it in our power, and then we're going to say, let's disassemble it and never use it. In the war. While the war is still going on, let's disassemble it and never use it because we're better than that. That's what the nuclear weapon. And the thing is this, that I know that it wasn't, well, I hope it wasn't us, black Africans, who disassembled the nuclear program in South Africa, in Tanzania. But to celebrate it, because there are black people who will celebrate that, right? To celebrate that is just to misunderstand what's going on. Just to misunderstand it entirely. You understand what I'm saying? But again, you know, this is actually an aside. You know, the real word to address, you know, isn't African, because like I said, if you don't understand African as a race, if you can't just identify yourself as a race, then you know, you're confused right now. You know, you're racially African. Just accept that. But the real word to look at is tribe. You understand? One thing that I picked up on a long time ago when I was discussing the Orientals and the Occidentals, because once upon a time I didn't group Eurasians together. I said there were Orientals and there were Occidentals, and there are originals. There are Asians, there are Europeans, and then there are Africans. Now it's a little bit too much. You know, just call them all the same thing, right? Call them non-Africans, call them Eurasians, and just leave it at that, right? But once upon a time I said, let me analyze these Occidentals, let me analyze these Orientals. And what I came up with the Oriental, for instance, is that the Oriental is very contractual. You know, they go by the book. You know, like you put a book in front of them, they go by it. You know, they're like, hey, look, whatever. And that's something to, you can go by that if you want to, right? But the Occidental is less, less about the book, more about the tribe, if you will. So to say the Occidental is really tribalistic, and you see this with the whole German nationalism, Germany and England and Britons and the Anglo-Saxons and WASP and so on and so forth. They're not necessarily a doctrine. They're not doctrinaire like the Oriental per se, let's say, but they are. But they're a close-knit group. Now, of course, realistically speaking, these two things are the same thing. Okay, these two things are the same thing, and that's something that you gotta be important. You gotta realize. But even more so, because if you were listening closely, you'll see that even more so, it's something that it's not a bad thing insofar as it's something that we're supposed to be doing, in the sense that, listen, tribalism, like I said when I said about Germany, tribalism is nationalism. Okay? So as to say that nationalism, or it becomes nationalism, so as to say that, realistically speaking, the word that you're discouraged from, tribalism, you're tribal this, you're tribal that. The word there, that discouragement that they impose upon you, because every last, more or less every last one of us don't want to see the word tribe. But tribalism is essentially nationalism. And we're gonna go to a break while you mull over that.
Greetings, everyone. This is KOCO from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace Seeker. This is Oni from the Pro-Black Perspective, and we need power. Power will not be handed to us. We need to build power. But in order to build power, we need a power blueprint. You need to study the best blueprints available. You have Garveys. You have Wilsons. You have Williams. You have mine. Now, you'll have Cooks. Carlos A. Cooks was Garvey's best student. The greatest mind in the world from 1940 to 1966. Yes, the greatest. Yet Whitey doesn't want you to read his blueprint. Cook's blueprint isn't religious. Cook's isn't for integration. Cook's isn't for communism. Cook's isn't even for anti-blacks. Cook's blueprint is for Africa. And Cook's blueprint is the unknown blueprint that was the basis of black power as we know it today. When you say buy black, you're talking about Cooks. When you say black is beautiful, you're talking about Cooks. When you say Malcolm got something right, you're talking about Cooks. But Cook's blueprint was lost. And Whitey is hiding that blueprint behind $1,000 paywall. He's hiding solutions from you, telling you you need to take out a small loan to get the information that can liberate you. Whitey does not want you to have solutions to your problems, but you need solutions. You need power. I will give you the Carlos A. Cooks Reader, valued over $1,000 at a 98% discount, $15. Send $15 to cash.me/$ABSONI with the subject Carlos and your email address, and I'll send you the ebook. We need power. You need blueprints. Start building today.
You are listening to the Pro-Black Perspective on KWAZ Radio.
Okay, so we're back. Now, some of you are, like I said, programmed to say, what's going on, Oni? Where are you taking us, Oni? But this is it right here. You have been programmed to look at African tribes as strictly cultural groups. Strictly culture, strictly primitive, so on and so forth. But here's the thing here's the thing. You haven't been paying attention to me. Right? And you probably haven't been paying attention to Leonard Jeffries. Okay? Leonard Jeffries says that culture, economics, and politics are linked. Right? And that's something that I kept emphasizing throughout my literary career. Okay? I said, look, we got to look at the trinity of liberation. You know? We got to have political, economical, and cultural liberation. You know? And if you look at the Pro-Black Compendium, you know, I have the 8-week program, the 8-week disciplinary program, and you see the first 4 subjects: politics, economics, culture, and ethics, right? And then I rehash them as scientific studies, you know, sociology, ecology, psychology, and ideology, right? That's for a reason. These 3 subjects, 3 or 4, you know, when you count ethics, right? These are the 4 subjects that are all linked together, in the sense that while you look at them separately, you look at it as, say, you know, hey, if you're you know, practice your African culture without understanding that your African cultural group, right, was also an economical, political, and ethical group. Okay? And like I said, those are the 4 topics in the Pro-Black Compendium. But again, the fact that your quote-unquote tribe was a political, economical, cultural, and ethical group makes it a nationalist group. And I'm gonna open up another book that, you know, Robin Walker wrote, which is called Before the Slave Trade, right? And for the most part, it's a book with a lot of pictures of, let's say, the you know, how, well, of us before the Ma'afa, right? And our impact, you know, globally. And I do, of course, highly recommend it, you know, because it's a Robin Walker book, so I recommend it, you know. Like there are certain people who, particularly since they're living now, like when you see they have a book, you get it, you know. And let me break it down for you. You know, Robin Walker, it says Robin Walker, you buy it. It says Audrey Waffo, buy it. Asara Motep, buy it. Clyde Winters, buy it, right? Onitaset Kumat, buy it twice. You know what I'm saying? A lot of you showing me how you got 1 copy. Show me you got 2. No, I mean, if you got it like that. All right, but let me show you what this Robin Walker, Before the Slave Trade. So in the introduction, right? Because the book doesn't really have too much text. I mean, it does have a lot of text, but this introduction is fairly interesting, right? He calls it the Select Committee on the Slave Trade, 1790, right? And so I'm just going to read this to you. And I want you to pay attention to how we're going to be describing a tribe, an African tribe from 1790, right? And listen to me, and try to hear out from the cultural, economical, political, and ethical components of this tribe, right? So here's the context. So it says in April 1790, a British government select committee called Charles Burns Waldstrom to testify before them. They published his testimony on 11 May 1790 in a report entitled Minutes of the Evidence Taken Before the Select Committee on the Slave Trade. In discussing the kidnapping and mass enslavement of Africans, the Select Committee cross-examined a number of expert witnesses who had first-hand experience of the enslaving process. Mr. Wadstrom, for example, was particularly well informed about its impact on the West African territories today called Senegal, Gambia, and Gorée Island. What follows here is taken from his testimony given on 29 April 1790. The Select Committee was keen to know about the quality of culture in that part of Africa. They asked Wadstrom, have they any manufacturers amongst them? Mr. Wadstrom's reply was most edifying. I have been surprised to see with what industry they manufacture their cottons, their indigo, and other dyeing articles, as well as several sorts of manufacture in wood. They make soap, they tan leather, and work it exceedingly well, and even with good taste. They work bar iron into several articles, as for instance, lances, instruments, fertilage, poignards, etc. They work in gold very ingeniously, and so well that I never have seen better made articles of that kind in Europe. A great number of articles for ornaments of gold, silver, brass, leather, etc. And this is from minutes of the evidence taken before the Select Committee on the Slave Trade, page 32 by Norris, and others. Right? Wadstrom further stated that their cloth and their leather they manufacture with uncommon neatness, and I have samples with me to show in case it should be desired. Right? So from Wadstrom's testimony, additional facts emerged. The king of that region was called Delany, a well-educated man. He held the position of Grand Marabout before his election as king. His subjects were very honest and hospitable and showed Wadstrom all civility and kindness. In addition, they had an extraordinary genius for commerce. Interestingly, they also had a materia medica of about 2,000 or nearer 3,000 plants. King Delany had entirely prohibited the slave trade throughout his whole kingdom. He also banned the sale of alcohol. However, the Senegal Company, a French concern, initially attempted to bribe the king to change his policy on the trade in people, but he refused their presence. Consequently, the Senegal Company resorted to bribing the lighter-skinned Moors to attack and kidnap Delany's subjects. The company supplied the Moors with the necessary arms, gunpowder, and ammunition to carry out the raids. The result of the aggression, according to Wadstrom, was the chief hindrance to the improvement of the cultivation, insofar as the Negroes never venture to go out into the fields unless very well armed. Significantly, the Select Committee asked, do you mean to say that if the slave trade was abolished, they would extend their cultivation and manufactures? Wadstrom answered, yes, particularly if some good European people had enterprising spirit enough to settle among them in another way than is the case at present. The testimony of Charles Wadstrom is highly important. How many people know that Africans used to manufacture soap? How many people are aware that Africans manufactured in gold so well that no better made articles of the goldsmith's crafts were to be found in Europe? This is also evidence that the image of a primitive and backward Africa was not believed by the British government. They knew better. This is noteworthy and ironic since they were the leading players behind the kidnapping and mass enslavement of Africans. Moreover, the Select Committee were shown exquisite items of African manufacture that may still be in the possession of the British government or its kindred institutions. Other witnesses before the Select Committee mentioned the large number of West Africans who were trilingual, i.e. fluent in English, French, and Portuguese, in addition to speaking their own languages, Wolof, Mandinga, etc. This high facility with language occurs over and over in African history. So all right, so that's a certain passage. I know a lot of you are like, hey, let me go, gotta go cop that book, and sure, go cop it, But here's the thing: did you pick up on the cultural? You picked up on how the question is on African culture, but they're discussing economics, let's say manufacturing, producing for yourself, right? But they're also discussing politics. They said the king used to be the grand marabout before he became the king, before he was elected the king, right? That's a certain political structure. And understand this, that what we just described sounds like a nation was a tribe. You understand? Tribes and nations are the same thing. You understand? And the different, the thing is that when you hear tribalism, when you hear tribe, you're like, oh, I want to get away from that. Oh man, you calling yourself a tribe? Oh no, don't do that. We're going backwards. We're regressing. But were these people backwards? You understand what I'm saying? They are manufacturing for themselves. They're building, and the thing is this: that this is a universal phenomenon. Martin Delany. I was looking for the quote, but I couldn't find it because it was taken off from the internet. That's another reason why you got to get these books. You got to get these paper copies of these books, because the internet's not always going to be up, or the websites are not always going to be up. So you get your paper copies. All right, you get the Pro-Black Compendium. You get Zuberi and the Maroons of Maa, because it's not always going to be there. You might say, hey man, but I got your blog. I mean, I got your podcast. Well, YouTube can take it down anytime it wants. Then what? You understand? So you listen, but you get these books, and you get as many copies as you can. Because another thing you gotta understand is this: that the way how they make these ebooks, just a little tangent, but the way how they make these ebooks is that they cut out the binding of the book, and then they put the pages into a certain machine that copies each page, that scans each page one at a time. And the other alternative, of course, is to open up a book and scan each page, manually. But of course, when books are like 300 pages, that's a lot compared to just cutting out the binding. So you might need an extra book that you could destroy just for the sake of, if I need to scan this and get it in the hands of more people, or if I need to scan this and then print it, for other people, that's what I'm gonna do, or that's what could be done. Or if somebody comes to me and says, hey, or somebody comes to you and says, hey, you have a copy of this book, we need it for this library. You say, yeah, look, you could just cut off the binding and then do whatever, and then we all have it. And that's actually what that I didn't do that with the Carlos A. Cook's reader, because it wasn't my book, right? And I don't have that machine, let's say. But that right there is, a way that when a book comes out of print, people can send it around. But again, let's go back to the subject. King Delany, you don't know what tribe he was. You don't know what tribal group he was. But they were all the same. And the thing with Delany's book, because I was talking about Delany now, Delany, he observed the Yoruba in person. And he said, wow, these are like the blameless Ethiopians, which pretty much is the biggest comment you could give a black person. Because in the ancient world, like I said, the African people were regarded as the most moral, the high-souled, the best people, the most intelligent, the most spiritual, so on and so forth. And they were called the blameless Ethiopians because they were innocent. And innocent in the sense of that they took action against chaos. They took action against Esfet, and they upheld Ma'at. They upheld order, right? Which is different from saying, oh, I'm innocent because I wasn't involved. If you see something terrible going on and you just say, oh, I'm not doing it, that don't mean that you're innocent. It just means you're not doing it. You're innocent if you stop the action, if you go against the disorder, if you become an ordering agent. But of course, that's an ethical conversation. But and again, that ethical conversation is something that we had in our tribes, if you will. But just understand that these tribes were nationalist groups. They were nations. What you saw with King Delany King Delany was the rule, not the exception. You understand? The manufacturing of your own products and the gold and so on and so forth. That's the rule, not the exception. Because when you look at ancient or classical African art, you look at what the Nak were doing. You look at what the Yoruba were doing. You look at the Akan, like for instance, the Akan king is decked in gold. But again, he's a king. Now, when you talk about the Akan, you're just talking about the Abasam. You saying, the culture, the culture and the spirituality and so on and so forth. You don't understand that they're a political group. They have a king. They're an economical group. There's a lot of gold circulating around. The women are dressed in gold dust. You understand? There's a lot of clothes going. The manufacturing going on. They're not just praying to the Abasam or whatever, or communicating with the Abasam or assuming the role of the Abasam. No, there's a lot. There's an economy. There's a politic, but you just focused on the Abasam, and you think you some super African because of it. But meanwhile, you don't even understand that their political organization, and their political organization was different from the Yoruba, or from the Igbo, or from any other group. And we're gonna go into more groups, later. But the whole idea is that they were nationalists. But and when you study our story, you realize that they were also survival groups. You understand? And here's the thing right here. Like I was saying, they were Pan-African nationalist groups. So in essence, let me say it this way. I'm pushing Pan-African nationalism, right? That's what I'm doing. I'm saying, look, we gotta follow Pan-African nationalism, okay? And sometimes when you hear people talk about Pan-Africanism, they say, that's a new concept, based off of, the experience in America or something, some sort of nonsense, right? They say Pan-African nationalism is a, Western concept and so on and so forth. But look at this again, right? The tribes of Africa, they are Pan-African. Now, first off, they're nationalist groups. You understand that they're nationalist groups because they're about the empowerment of their people, right? They're political, they're economical, they're cultural, and they're ethical, right? They're political, economical, cultural, and ethical enclaves, if you will. They're groups that are empowering themselves to have their own land, and they're doing them. They're nationalist groups. They're nations, okay? But they're also Pan-African, and the reason why, and a part of the reason why I would say that is we're going to talk about my friend in Tanzania. So I'm learning a little bit of Swahili very slowly because I'm kind of busy. But the sister telling me about Swahili, she teaches me Swahili, and the thing with her is that she's a Muslim. Okay, and that's very important right here, right? She's a Muslim, but because I'm talking to this sister, she's my African sister. I say, I think at one point I asked her if she had like what ethnic background she had, right? She don't want to talk about that, and this is something important. She don't want to talk about the ethnic, tribal background, whatever, because she's a Muslim. Not only because she's a Muslim, but she's a modern African woman. Nobody wants to associate with no tribe. But she did tell me that she told me what her mother was a certain tribe, and her father was a certain tribe, right? And she didn't really tell me what tribe she was per se, but that's not even important. I mean, it's not to say it's not important, but that's not the point. The point is this: that her mother was one tribe and her father was another tribe, and therefore, but she's only one of those tribes, or even she's a blend of them. But the fact that she could be a blend of two tribes makes it Pan-African. So I don't want to go into too much of her business, but her. Okay, so I didn't specify it, but one of her parents is Shirax, and another one is Mdingo, right? and her husband is Shiraz. Okay? Now, of course, I might be pronouncing those wrong, but that right there shows you that she is the embodiment of a Pan-African mix. But she's not alone. You get what I'm saying? And this is something that you have to pick up on, that these quote-unquote, because you call them ethnicities now. You say, oh, they're not tribes, they're ethnicities, right? They are not genealogical. They're not genealogically isolated. No, they are, they're a genealogical mix. You know, to say that somebody, like if they do, you know, if these crackers do your blood test and don't let them, you know, like some sister was telling me, or the sister said, you know, their blood tests are going to be based off of their alternative history, right? Or history instead of our story, right? But, or some people might say true story. But the idea is this, that the Igbo are not some, you know, like none of these groups are one genealogy, if you will. And of course, you have to understand that you can come to understand that when you understand the historical origin of these, or if you understand that they're nationalist groups, But the reality is that even if you don't understand that, just seeing my friend, you know, she's not the exception. Okay? So because even in like the wrestling, you know, the Manding wrestling, you know, like if you read Roots, you'll see that you know, Kunta Kente's father, maybe even uncles, like let's say his uncles were traveling around, not just Jufer, but you know, West, you know the Manding people, the Mandingo people, or whatever, right? They were traveling around and building and making villages, you know, just building villages, right? But then there was wrestlers, like, and there are still wrestlers today who wrestle in front of the women to attract women, but they're moving around different cities attracting women, you know, with their wrestling prowess, if you will, right? The whole idea is that it's Pan-African, but if you're not African, right, then you're not a part of the tribe. And that's what makes it Pan-African, as opposed to, say, pan-human. So just a long story short, I'm talking about Pan-African nationalism, right? Some people in America once upon a time were saying, let's just, you know, Pan-African, so on and so forth, right? But the reality is that we as African people have been practicing or enunciating or articulating or promoting Pan-African nationalism for the longest. The whole tribal discussion is Pan-African nationalism. But you don't see it yet. You don't see it yet. Or if you do see it, I'm gonna make it more clear for you, right? Because the key is this: you got to look at Oduduwa. Okay, so Oduduwa is this ancient, is this African from once upon a time who was a student in Upper Kemet. Okay, everybody knows this. Everybody knows that Oduduwa was a student in Upper Kemet, but he's very important, right? Because he's also the founder of the Yoruba people. So Oduduwa is a student in Upper Kemet. Okay, and everybody knows this, right? And he also founds the Yoruba people. All right? So now come back. J.A. Rogers would tell you that a lot of African people on the continent, right, come from the East, right? Chancellor Williams later on, you know, would go to Africa and he'd ask them, you know, where are you guys from? You know, what's your origin story? A lot of Africans would say, oh, we're from the East, right? And when they say East, you know, if you were in Western Africa and you say East, you're talking about Eastern Africa, if you will, right? Basically, you're saying the Nile Valley. And it's not to say that everybody came from the Nile Valley. Okay, it's just to say that like the founding person might have traveled to that part of our continent and founded a group. And so if you say, hey, where you guys from, or where's all this coming from, they might not have been from, like, they might have been there before, or they might have even visited. Who knows? But the idea is that's part and parcel of what may be referenced, right? And of course there's another aspect to it, because during this time of let's say ancient Kemet, if you will, right, or like I said earlier, regarding the Kush and Kemet, right, before Kemet it was uninhabitable, and just the same with Western Africa. During the time of Kemet, Western Africa might not have been entirely habitable. You understand what I'm saying to you? It might have been a forest. So that's another thing to bear in mind, that when people say, oh yeah, we might have came from the east, it might be because not too many people were really in the west. I mean, because again, we concentrate around bodies of water. So there's a much larger population around bodies of water than there are, let's say in the desert, or in the jungle, or in the and it's not to say there's nobody in the desert, not nobody in the jungle. It's just to say that like it's kind of like when you look at cities and rural areas, urban areas and rural areas. You could build cities around water, but you can't really build cities in the desert or in the trees. You get what I'm saying? But of course that's a whole other conversation. Now the thing with Oduduwa, right, is they have what we would call in this terrible language, the yogic tradition, the chakras, if you will. So when you look at the Yoruba people, right, they have the chakras, like Shango, correlates to a certain chakra, like the Orisha correlates to certain chakras, right? But you know this is from Kemet, right? And that Kemet spread it to other parts of the world, because you see some of Kemet's stuff in Dogon, the Dogon people. You see the yogic tradition, if you will, in the Yoruba, but you also see it in the Lakota, who are quote unquote Native Americans, on the eastern part of America, right? So you see the yogic tradition in the Lakotas, and it's not indigenous to them, because their neighbors don't have it. It's brought to them through, like African contact, if you will, right? But then you also have the Indians, of course, who have this yogic tradition, right? And again, it's not indigenous to them. It's brought to them by ancient African people. Okay? You could say the Kushites, you could say the Kamites, but the reality is that it's brought to them from another people. So again, you see that, and then of course, like if that's not a good example enough, you have the Igbo, who are building pyramids to this day, right? And regarding tribes and so forth, you have the Bantu, who a lot of us, many of us, are descended from the Bantu, and the Bantu were a migratory group of Africans who were just spreading iron knowledge, like iron working and iron technology, all over Africa. You understand? They just up and spread technology all over Africa. So here's the thing right here, right? Oduduwa was a student in Kemet, right? And he establishes the Yoruba people, right? Now here's something more. Plato, white boy, right, was a student in Africa, okay? And what does he do with that knowledge? He writes the Republic, right? And the Republic is this ideal, like he writes out what an ideal government would look like, You get what I'm saying? And he even talks, and in other books that he has, he mentions, who he considers his mentor, this dude named Socrates, right? Who the Greek, his own people kill because he keeps talking about, ancient Africa, like Africa. Well, not ancient. During that time, it wasn't ancient Africa, just Africa. But because he keeps promoting African people, he's like, oh man, African gods, African divinities are the real ones, Greek ones are the fakes, all that. He's doing all that, so they kill him, right? But that's important though. The important thing right here is that Plato, just a student in Africa, he writes about the ideal government, the ideal people, the ideal whatever, right? Now Moses, another student in Kemet, right? He creates, again, listen to me, he creates the Israeli people. You get what I'm saying? He just fabricates a history, But you pick up on how these fabricated people are a socio-ethnic group. You understand? So he makes up, he studies in Kemet. He's probably not a real person, but the idea is that, or even if he is a real person, the idea is that this whole belief comes from students in the African tradition, okay? And as students in the African tradition, they come up with this idea of creating a tribe, right? That allows them to have certain power and privileges as they practice that quote-unquote nationalism, if you will, right? So again, go to Plato, he writes out what an ideal nation state would look like, right? He doesn't necessarily create a nation state, but he sees what it, but then Moses creates a nation state with a people by fabricating a history. Okay? Go to another student. Now, Ram. Now, like I said, this is one of the more important white people in history. Another student, right? And he basically creates what you consider white unity. And I really need you to read this one. This is on page 135. This is the Pro-Black Compendium. 135, page 135. But I really need you to read that one, right? Now you have Muhammad. Now he might not necessarily have been. I don't know if he went to ancient Kemet or so on and so forth, right? But the thing we know about Muhammad is that Mecca before him, right, had a female deity, if you will, or female divine, if you will, named Alat. So it's like Allah with a T instead of an H, right? He replaces Alat with Allah, and he makes this pan-human group that focuses on Arabs. You know what I'm saying? And it follows this Christ model too, right? So again, it's a pan-Arab, if you will, but a pan-human group, because now today you see Africans and Europeans, all of them are quote unquote, Muslims. Right, but that's something to consider. That it's not a pan, Asian group or a pan Arab group, if you will. Right, although it is seeking to unify all these Arabs, right? But it's pro-Arab, but pan-human, right? And that's something that we have to emphasize as well, right? Then of course you got Christ, for whatever reason. His disciples might make him up, if you will. And they're another pan-human group, but they're focusing on whites today. And they give homage to Kemet too, right? But again, but of course you gotta pay attention to, where that narrative comes from, with the ancient Romans, if you will. You know what I'm saying? The Nicene, reading or what have you, But when you look at it all together, particularly with Plato, Moses, and Oduduwa, right, or Ram, right? When you look at these people in particular, the students in particular, right, you see that Kemet was an educational, nation-building academy. You understand what I'm saying to you? As to say that nationalism was the subject matter in Kemet. Because again, one of their students, Plato, comes out and says, hey, look, this is how we would form an ideal government. The government of today isn't great, but a better government would look like this, right? Or Moses, which, if you really study the name of Moses, is like a derivative of a certain rank in Kemet schools. You get what I'm saying? So it's to say that, either he named himself, so it's possible that he wasn't even, white, if you will. Just, it's possible that he was just, a confused black person who was like, hey, we can make a rival people or something like that. But whatever it is, the name correlates to a certain high-ranking, like almost like a PhD, if you will. Maybe not a PhD, but almost like a PhD. Who knows, right? And what he does is he creates a tribe of people. Fabricates the history, creates a tribe of people, right? Ram, another one. Ram is, like I said, you got to read the Pro-Black Compendium for this one. But Ram pretty much, really shows the different, like the impact that having an African education, or even just understanding the order of Africans, can have on a people. Because Ram pretty much creates, racial animosity, as we know it. Because the thing with white people is that they were fighting amongst themselves before Ram, and then they started fighting you after, But Ram it's well known that Ram, went to Africa. Now, last but not least is Oduduwa. And now he might have been top student, right? Or even a student who, whatever the situation was. But Oduduwa takes his knowledge from ancient Kemet and says, look, I'm going to go build a nation out west. And in so doing, however, right, you realize like the Yoruba people, if you will, aren't necessarily an ancient people. You understand? Like Oduduwa doesn't create these people. He says, hey, I'm gonna go into this part of the continent, and I'm going to form a group of us who are going by our way, from my study of nationalism. You understand? And one of the things that he really takes with him is, like I said, the yogic tradition, and who knows how great he was, while he was in the academy of Waset, But the reality is, and here's the thing too, that some of the education of Waset I put in the Pro-Black Compendium. You understand? So some of that education is in the Pro-Black Compendium, but I just want to go back to, Oduduwa. The reality is that he's there, he's studying in Kemet, and everybody knows this. And then he builds a tribe as we know it. But of course, it wasn't a tribe when he was building it. You get what I'm saying? It was probably just a group of Africans there, if any. You understand what I'm telling you? That today we see it as a tribe. Like we see the Yoruba as a tribe of people. But of course, the Yoruba are this complex political, economical, cultural, and ethical group. They have a complex spirituality. They have a system of governance. They have a system, a commercial enterprise. All of that, right? But during the time of Oduduwa, they didn't. And again, he was a student in Kemet. Now, of course, he could have been a student for a long time. To my understanding, if I recall correctly, to get to the higher stages of education in the Nile Valley, you had to study for a good amount of time, maybe 40 years, from the time you were 6, but whatever it was, I don't necessarily know the details. Maybe somebody else does, right? But the reality that you have to come to terms with, and this is important, is that you have to you can't look at history strictly from a position of it was in the past. Like, you have to understand that at one point the past was the present, and so in the present of Oduduwa, was there a Yoruba people? No. Now, that's the important thing right here, right? The reality of this is that ethnic groups today, right, for the most part, or it might be universally, maybe. I mean, I couldn't say, 100%, but for the most part, they are fabricated. You see what I'm saying? Like I'm saying, you go back to the genealogy of my friend, regarding her, because when you study African people, you sometimes come across this phrase matrilineal. Okay, to say that and we know this inside of America, for instance, that if you were enslaved, it was matrilineally. As to say that if your mother was enslaved, you'd be enslaved. Like that was the quote unquote. That was how they got away with misogyny, if you will. Because they didn't really, they didn't want black men to white women. They didn't mind, So that was a whole other thing, right? But that's the situation in Africa too. So as to say that if let's say if one of your parents is Ndingo, another one is Shirax, right? Let's say if you're a matrilineal people, and the thing is this, not everybody was matrilineal, but if you were a matrilineal people, then if your mother was Ndingo, then you were Ndingo, right? And look, the truth is that it might not even have been that. It might not have even been that way universally. As to say that even if you were a matrilineal people, you might have still said, you know what? But I want to go live with my Shirak's husband. And if you live with him, you would eventually, you might. And if a lot of people moved over to his culture, yada yada, you could mold the Shirak's people over time. It's organic, right? But the main thing is that these ethnic groups, as we know them, right, particularly today, they were fabricated not just in the sense of, there were going to be organic changes along the way, but again, you go back to Oduduwa, right, and they didn't exist before him. They didn't predate him. So in order for them to be a real group, they would have to have been permanently there, if you will. But he made them up. Because, again, because you look at it like tribe means something, means it's a biological group, and you can do a DNA test to find out what tribe you were from. No! The reality is that there are nationalist groups. There are nations. He built a nation. Just like, regarding Moses, if you will. Builds the Israeli people. They're not a real people. You understand? And the Euro Jew today is even less real than the Jew of Moses. Moses' time. He's even less real because they it's been a long time since I studied them, but it's like might have just been a group of German people who were just like, you know what, we're gonna follow this belief system. You understand? But don't quote me on that one. You can look it up if you are so interested and so concerned. But the reality is that again, you got to look at the dual fabrication part of it. Just the idea that if two groups got into a relationship, right, that the descendant would be only a part of one group. And sometimes you would say it's matrilineal because they might just live with their mother and be raised by their mother amongst their mother's people, or they might be raised amongst their father's people. You understand? One thing though is that, like a lot of African cultures, a lot of our cultures, if you will, or a lot of our tribes, let's say, right? The maternal uncle looked after the development of his male child, and again, that's something very important, you know, because the maternal uncle being a part of his nephew's life kind of makes sure that the nephew always has a male role model. You understand? So it's to say that it's a solution for today, you know, because today, you know, we always complain about, oh, you know, well, we don't really complain about it, but it's always being said, oh, the man, you know, men leave their kids or something, and it's not true, but you know, it's said that men leave their kids, and the reality is that if your uncle stayed in your life as a role model or helped guide you, you know, even in the absence of your father, you know, if he said, I'm going to look after my sister's son because he's passing on, you know, because he's my mother's legacy. He's my mother's, you know, he's from my mother's people, right? If the uncle said, I'm going to look after my nephew, right? You wouldn't have this whole idea that boys don't have male role models. You wouldn't. Notwithstanding absentee fathers or not. But of course, you know, that's an African, you know, solution, if you will. You know, and the reality is that if you go to some elders, even here, well, I'm in America right now, so even in America, you go to some elders, they will tell you that maternal uncles was a thing in America too, once upon a time. It's not now, but it was a thing, you know? And of course, you know, it's probably not a thing right now, you know, on the continent too much. I mean, in certain parts, sure, but in certain other parts, not really. But again, like I said, that's a whole other conversation. So the point is that these are made up people. So tribes, listen to me, are created nationalist organizations, right, with their own languages for survival. And a lot of them, listen to me, are diasporas. So that's something that I like to do. Like when people say the African diaspora, you know, they're always talking about Africans who are not on the continent, right? But the reality is that, like for instance, the Dogon people, from what we understand, fled Kemet because of the invasions of Eurasians. You understand? So they are a diaspora of Kemet, if you will. You get what I'm saying? And the reason why I would stress Kemet, because again, Kemet was like a academy, like a university town. You get what I'm saying? So a lot of Africans would travel, like kind of like Timbuktu later on. You know, a lot of Africans from all over the world would go and study in Kemet. So for what it was, the Kushites, you know, said, look, we're gonna establish a nation here in Kemet, you know, but pretty much we're gonna establish a school, you know, a nice place to educate people, you know, all over the world. Well, all over Africa, right? It was eventually opened up to non-African people, but that was through a certain war. And you know, like I said, I gotta write another book. You know, so I could describe to you, you know, what happened. But in the meantime, you know, read the Pro-Black Compendium, read Zuberi and the Maroons of Maa. Get your free shipping. Get both books, all right? You know, and get multiple copies, you know? But like I said, you know, these are, they're all, like a lot of them are diasporas, right? And they don't have tribal land. You understand? Like I said, a lot of people come from the east, if you will, or a lot of times the land wasn't occupied by anybody, or was occupied by a few people, you know, or certain other people, you know. But the idea is that Like for instance, it might have been occupied by the Twa, or a small group of the Twa, but or even the Khoisan, if you will, right? And then again, like I said, the Bantu, well, we spread over the land. We said, hey, look, we got iron technology, we can work this land. Let's live together. Let's cohabit. Let's cohabit. But again, that's a nationalist group. You understand? For survival, Pan-African nationalist group for survival. Going to other parts of their continent and establishing nations with political, economical, cultural, and ethical standards. Organization. You following what I'm saying to you? I started off by saying the answer is in front of your face, right? And meanwhile, all along, you knew about tribes. But did you know that they were Pan-African nationalist groups? Right? So again, go back. If the Yoruba were ancient, you know what I'm saying? Oduduwa wouldn't have went to school. You understand what I'm saying to you? If the Yoruba were ancient, then Oduduwa wouldn't have went to school. Because if you're ancient, there's no school before you. You know what I'm saying? So like, for instance, now the Kushite are not the first people, okay? And I can kind of go into this. I want to go into this sometime, but like, basically, oh yeah, I put in the Pro-Black Compendium about the Maa Federation that preceded the Kushite. You get what I'm saying? And then if you will, you could kind of open up, the Eurasian Bible to the story of Noah, and if you pay attention to Noah, Noah builds a boat and escapes a flood, and then after the flood, he has one son named Ham, and Ham has has 4 children, but the first 2 are Cush and Kemet, or Cush in Egypt. I think they call him Mizraim, right? And part of why they don't call him Kemet is because they called the son Ham. So Ham represents the black race, okay? And the black race, but Ham might be a derivative of Cam. You understand? Like how chemistry, chemistry and chemistry, But the idea is that, but here's the thing, right? Here's the gist of it. Kemite or Kam means black people. Kemet means community of, like, the black people, the community of black people, right? Hamite means black people. So, and again, like I said, these ancient, the quote unquote, the people who established the Israeli religion, right? The Jew religion or whatever, right? They studied in Kemet. So here they are studying in Kemet, in this nation building academy, and they're learning history, or our story. And the way how they're hearing it is that there was a flood, and then after the flood, the first nation was Cush, and then Kemet, then Mizraim, Egypt, right? Where they're studying it, right? And so what's really being said is that Kemet, they're saying that like what being taught to them is that Ham is the first son. Basically, the people in Kemet are saying the first people after this flood, or even the first people in the world, were the black race. And then the black race established Cush and then Egypt. You understand? And here's the important thing: the flood, because the things that we know is that Cush wasn't the first kingdom. Taseti, wasn't the first kingdom per se, or if it was the first kingdom, you got to go by a certain definition of kingdom. But the reality is that the Maa Federation preceded it. But the Maa Federation was in the Sahara Desert before it was a desert. So the Sahara was overrun with sand. Okay, so it was flooded with sand. And after the Maa Federation or Confederation was flooded with sand, Taseti, black people of that region spread all over the world. They spread to China, they spread to India, they spread to so on and so forth. But spread to the Americas, they spread everywhere, right? But the reality is that the main place that we went was in Kush. So essentially, the Bible, so essentially these stupid white people are listening to us as we talk about how the black race followed up after we were flooded with sand, and they're thinking about boats. You get what I'm saying? That's another reason why you can't really follow this religion, because it's like a bunch of idiots are listening to what are studying under the greatest the greatest minds. Let's say some of the greatest minds that ever lived, right? And they just don't understand what they're saying. They're thinking about boats, they're thinking about water, they're thinking about a global flood, if you will, and to this day they're still looking for evidence of it. But the flood, or maybe let's say a good working idea of what this quote unquote flood was this desertification of an ancient African confederation. You understand? But of course that's another conversation altogether. But the idea is that though is this, that Oduduwa, went to school, and it goes to show you why you should go to school, why you go to school. And that is to say that education is to seek to develop, is to seek or develop your tribe. You get what I'm saying? So like I said again, some of us look at history as the past instead of a former present. You know what I'm saying? You just look at it as like it's always been the past, instead of it, having at one point been the present, right? But Oduduwa had to have approached the people because he didn't create a people. You know what I'm saying? So even though you say he creates the Yoruba people, right? He doesn't literally create them. He approaches them and says, "Hey, look, I got a nationalist idea. I studied in Kemet." So it's possible he was a top graduate of Kemet, and he told people that we had to follow our ways and follow a certain form of government and strengthen ourselves and so on. But that's the context, right? So from now on, so what I'm saying is that you don't want to talk about, when you talk about the Yoruba, you don't want to just say, oh, the Yoruba. You want to talk about the Yoruba as Africans who were embracing our studied way of their ancestors. And that's what tribes are. So the tribes are not, some fixed group, the Igbo or certain so on and so forth, the so on and so forth, yada yada. No. They were, or we were, Africans who were embracing our studied ways of our ancestors. You understand what I'm saying to you? We're going to go to another commercial.
Greetings, everyone. This is KOCO from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
When will African people have basic rights? When will we be protected? When will our cost of living be eliminated? When will our cultures be preserved? We need a new leadership, one that has studied the problems and learned the solutions. The Pro-Black Compendium is the book to start off that leadership. Quotations, essays, poems, stories, codes of conduct, curricula, principles, relationship advice, marketing tips, group economics, games, book clubs, movie nights, chronologies, civilizations, wars, warriors, authors, songs, conflict resolution. The list goes on. There is no book more necessary for starting our people on the path to African redemption.
You are listening to the Pro-Black Perspective on KWAZ Radio.
Okay, so a long time ago, sitting down with this nice sister, right? And she's telling me, she's telling me about these. She's like, hey, look, we got to do what these Arabs. She was like, once upon a time she was a Muslim, or and then she like eventually became a Christian, and then by the time I met her, she like was no longer about that life. But she was saying when she was a Muslim, like they were really influential on her. Like they really like, even though she's an African woman, like she was from Africa, right? On top of that, but she really believed she could have been an Arab if she practiced her Islam right. You understand what I'm saying to you? Like she really believed that she could be an Arab. And so she was saying to herself, she was saying to me, she was like, look, we got to do what these people are doing. Because they know what they're doing. Like they have, they can only eat halal food, let's say, right? And there was more she said. But she was saying that, regarding that, like, we should create a religion. We should create a religion in order to, take, to pretty much. Well, the thing I didn't like it because I was like, look, I'm not trying to create no false narratives for any reason. She's like, no, it's for power. Create this religion, and we get power. And it almost sounded like, I don't think she said it per se. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. It's hard to remember this, but. It's like, I don't want to exploit the ignorance of our people. I don't want our people to be ignorant. I want our people to have the truth, And so when she was saying this idea, when she was selling it, I wasn't buying it, But it stuck. But the conversation stuck with me, And so here's the thing I want you to pick up on, right? So the Arab the Muslim has jihad, and the Christian has crusades. Okay, the Jew has kosher food, and the Arab has halal food, right? And this is important, okay? Because this halal food and this kosher food, when I was younger, for instance, I had these Euro Jew neighbors or whatever, right? And when you're younger, unfortunately, if your parents ain't right, a lot of times, like with our people, for instance, when the parents ain't right, they make you play with anybody. You know what I'm saying? They make you play with anybody that they encourage it. So as a young person, I was supposed to go play. Well, I mean, I didn't really play too, like, we really didn't play outside too much. But, like, on this one occasion, we did play outside, and my mother liked it. And so, when she saw me play with these, these Jew boys or whatever, she had, she was like, hey, come here, Oni. I want, offer these boys some Coca-Cola. You know what I'm saying? And so, I was like, okay, sure. Hey, you guys want some Coca-Cola? And they were like, what is that? Pretty much, because they have their own independent stuff. That's something that you gotta remember. And so one of them asked me, well, is it kosher? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. Or whatever. And then he says, so he's like, he asked his like his father or something, can I have this Coca-Cola? Is it kosher or whatever? His father was like, sure. Sure, you can have it, And the thing is this, that when I was younger, I didn't think much of it. They just drank the Coke, We kept playing. I don't think we ever played again. I don't think we ever played with each other again. But, I think it was the first and last time. But the story stuck with me, right? And the thing that you got to realize is that the reason why this kid could drink it, the Coca-Cola, was probably not because it was kosher, because I don't think it was. I don't know if it was. I don't care, right? But because he didn't have to pay for it. And I'm not trying to say, like go into that, these people are cheap and all that stuff. I'm saying that the establishment of the halal food and the kosher food is to keep money in, or to keep the economy of those people alive and independent. You get what I'm saying? And if you take something for free, it doesn't impact that economy, if you will, in a sense. Especially if you take it in moderation. You get what I'm saying? If you get grabbing a random drink. I mean, it's different if that's all they're drinking. But if it's just one drink, yada yada, it's not going to impact your economy like that, right? And so that's the reason behind it, if you will, And that's kind of thing what the sister was telling me. She was like, look, we need to have, we need to make certain foods, if you will, taboo. And the important thing to know is that amongst African people, there are quote unquote tribes that do have taboo foods and taboo so on and so forth. So we have that. And then even on the note of when I was talking about jihads and crusades, like I said, we also had empires, we had colonization, and we had the Wahami Mesu, which is roughly translated as the repetition of the rebirth. And that's a really important thing to understand. But not just that, also understand what the Pianke, Shabaka, and Taharka did. And you could read that up on the Pro-Black Compendium on page 148. But again, we had taboo foods, and we need to get that back as well. That's really what the sister was saying. We need to have taboo food, because what the other people say nominally is that they don't trust foreigners in food preparation, or they have a certain way for how you prepare food, or certain rules on how to cook, and that's what makes something kosher or makes something halal, if you will, right? But really what it does is that it keeps you eating amongst yourself. It keeps the money within your community, right? But this is something that really, it boils down to. This whole conversation boils down to that we, quote unquote, well, some people say conscious, right? But let's say conscious Africans need to be a part of a tribe. You understand? And it's ironic, right? Because, like I said, it's always been in front of us. We've always heard people say, look, you can't, we're African. You can't go by any sort of tribal distinction, if you will. Sometimes we say stuff like, oh, white man don't care if you're Yoruba, don't care if you're a Muslim, don't care if you're Christian, don't care if you're more, yada yada, right? And don't care if you're Israelite or whatever, right? And it's like, who cares what a white man cares? Nobody cares. But the whole idea is that people who are part of tribes, particularly in Africa, would say, I'm Yoruba, I'm an African, sure, but I'm Yoruba. And what they're saying is pretty much what's in the Pro-Black Compendium, which is that, and the thing is that I'm a little bit, like I said, I need to write a third book, because there's a quote in the Pro-Black Compendium that describes my philosophy on the 4 organizations that African people should be a part of. So Zuberi and the Maroons of Maa goes into it more, right? In the sense of it goes into details about these 4 organizations, if you will, right? But the Pro-Black Compendium has one quote from me, which says, race, nation, community, and family first. You get what I'm saying? And so the idea is that those are the four organizations that you're supposed to be a part of. You're supposed to be a part of a racial organization, which you are. You're an African, right? You're supposed to be a part of a national organization, which, if you're paying attention, is the tribe, right? Is the tribe. It's a nation. The tribe is a nation, right? You're supposed to be a part of a brotherhood or sisterhood, you know. And I just said community to keep it, neutral and applicable, right? And you're supposed to be a part of a family, which is another organization, right? And the idea is that it's not just race first; it's you got to put all four of these first at the same time, right? All four of them have to be in your decision making, but that's the thing right there, the nation, right? We tend to overlook and neglect the nation. You know what I'm saying? But the nation is really the tribe. So it's to say that, if you and the tribe, if you will, has always been a solution for us as a people. Because the tribe is a nationalist organization. But it's also like an all-encompassing nationalist organization. That's to say that when you're a part of a nationalist organization, it should be all-encompassing, if you will. So we tend to mock the Moors and the Israelites, or we tend to mock the Islamics and the Muslims, if you will, and the Christians, right? But these are quote unquote nationalist organizations. You understand? And I remember there was this Moor, or he used to be, part of the Brooklyn scene too. And he would ask people, "What's your nationality?" And people would say. And I remember one time I was engaging his sister, and he engaged her too. He was like, "What's your nationality?" No. Him and I and a friend of mine were talking, and then the sister was passing by, and he engaged her. He said, "What's your nationality?" And she said, "I'm an African." He's like, "That's not a nationality." Yada yada. And then they went and had a debate. She seemed like a strong sister, so my friend went over and brought her to one of my meetings. You know what I'm saying? But the whole idea is that what the guy was saying about what's your nationality is actually an important aspect, because it's like because really he's saying what's your tribe. You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing that people in Africa would ask too, like what's your tribe? But the thing is that we lost the meaning of tribes. So we think, oh well, if you descended from the Igbo, then you were Igbo. But you're not necessarily an Igbo because you're not practicing. Like I have a friend whose parents are Igbo, right? But he don't know anything about Igbos. As I say that, he just sees it as a genealogical group, as a biological group. But that's not what it is. It's a nationalist organization for survival. You understand? So, in that sense, right, he was an Igbo. Like his parents probably weren't even Igbo either, because as to my understanding, they're Christians. You understand? They're Christians, Christians in Nigeria. Okay, so their nationalist group, if you will, is Nigeria. You understand? They're not practicing, Igbo politics, Igbo culture, Igbo economics, Igbo ethics. You get what I'm saying? And he doesn't know anything about it. You understand? But I say all this to say that the what's your nationality question, if you will, is actually an important question. You get what I'm saying? So because here's the thing though, that these Moors and these Israelites, the thing that you don't like about them, and the thing that you probably should respect about them, the thing that you don't like about the thing you should respect is that they are fabricated groups that were built around, uplifting, around their own survival, if you will. Because I remember one time, like I said, the same friend of mine, we were in Brooklyn another place, and this dude, we were engaged with some dude, and he was like, he was trying to push onto us that we were Israelites. And the reason why he was calling us Israelites is because we were not sleeping, if you will. So as I say that the ideology would raise up, Africans who had some self-awareness and put down the Africans who didn't have self-awareness. And of course, at the time, that wasn't my interest. I wasn't interested in putting down, Africans who were asleep, because because I was trying to wake Africans up. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying now I'm trying to put down Africans who are asleep, but I'm just saying, if you understand what was going on, this Israelite group that he was touting was, again, another fabricated group, and the only trouble that you have with them is that they had some false origin, and they were connected to, let's say they look down on African people. You know what I'm saying? They look down on Africa and African people, even though they were African people themselves, racially. So it's like you don't want to look down on your own racial group. But then the Moors don't necessarily look down on their own racial group, if you will. But in a sense they do, right? But and they also look at it, like the real twisted history. And you actually did, and I don't know if you picked up on in the book Before the Slave Trade when I mentioned that the Moors were the ones who destroyed, King Delany. But of course there was something wrong with King Delany that you should have picked up on too. The fact that he was even talking to these white boys. You get what I'm saying? But of course that's where we're gonna have to go into what it is. Here's how it all started, and it's the idea is that you listen to me. You need to be a part of a tribe, and that tribe should not follow practices against our survival. You get what I'm saying? That's right there is the ding, 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 ding. Okay? Many, and it's something that you have to pick up on, that many of the tribes of Africa, remember, tribes are nation groups, right? But they're tribes in the sense, but again, it's a different type of nationalism in the sense of, because you can pick up on it in the Pro-Black Compendium again. Because I say, wherever there's an African nation. You get what I'm saying? Only thing is this, that we need to, like you could revisit that, right? Because the reality is that wherever you are, that's your nationalism. That's your nation. You're the nation. You connecting with other African people makes a nation, right? But you can make a tribe if you put in the political, economical, cultural, and ethical order, standards, if you will. That is what would make it stronger. So, this is something that you have to pick up on, though. That many of the tribes of Africa from old were anti-white. Okay? So this you can see outlined on Chancellor Williams' book, but you can also see it in Ibn Battuta. You get what I'm saying? As I say that, and when I say anti-white, I mean anti-white. I mean, they killed white people on sight. You understand what I'm saying to you? So there were tribes in Africa who killed white people on sight, who understood that white people were negative people, who understood that white people could destroy their civilization as they knew it. You understand? So they killed white people on sight. And Ibn Battuta mentions this, Chancellor Williams mentions this, and Ibn Battuta is not even black. He's a white boy, and he was like, I can't go to certain parts of Africa because they kill white people on sight. And by white boy, I mean he's like an Arab. Okay? But he says they kill white people on sight. And notice that with King Delany, he doesn't do that. And that's something that you have to pick up on too. King Delany doesn't do this, notwithstanding that it's 1790. You understand what I'm saying to you? 1790. So the enslavement of African people begins, let's say 1,000 years before that with the Arabs, right? But when it comes to Wazungu, right, or white people in particular, right, it begins in like the 15th century. So 15th century according to the white man's, whatever. But 1400 something, right? So 300 years into the enslavement of African people, right? He's still letting white people in and treating them with civility and kindness. They're probably buying gold. They're probably buying, soap and all that, whatever, which is whatever. But the reality is that that right there is one of the problems with that particular tribe. You understand what I'm telling you? Now, I'm saying that we need to be a part of tribes. And I'm saying this. You know, the nationalist organizations make up what a tribe is. Now, my only problem is this. The organization that I have, or the organization that I named, if you will, is the African Blood Siblings. Right? That sounds more like an organization than a tribe. Right? And not just that, the name was more of a homage to the African Blood Brotherhood, and that was partly because I liked Claude McKay's poem, and I said, let me, you know, which is if we must die, you know, but the reality is that he was a commie, and he was a Marxist or whatever, and he was like heavy body with it, and the African Blood Brotherhood was one of those groups too that wasn't really about that nationalism. So, you know, I really shouldn't even stick around with the name, you know. So I'm saying this: if you read the Pro-Black Compendium, you know, there is a essay called "The 4 Stages of African Consciousness," and of course that's like necessary reading. Okay, the highest stage, of course, is the Ankobia, you know. So that right there is a good name for a tribe of African people, the Ankobia. You know what I'm saying? And it's supposed to mean something, and it could mean something tomorrow. And one thing I would like you to do would do the hashtag I am Ankobia if you're about it. If you listen to this message and you think, hey, look, you know, I wanna declare to this world that I'm now a tribesman. I'm now a part of a tribe, an international Pan-African nationalist tribe. Then just do the hashtag I am Ankobia. You know, and you could at me, you know, at Onitaset, you know, on Twitter I'm talking. If you're on Twitter, that is. If you're even doing that stuff, you can also write me in the comment section below. You can email me. You know what my email is. It's in the description of this link. You could just contact me. Tell me, look, I'm about this Ankobia thing. You know, whatever. Just let people know you're about this Ankobia thing, and that's partly that's one of the books that I want to write. I want to write things, you know, things that are necessary for this, or maybe not necessary, but things to consider when it comes to being in an Ankobia. So we're a new tribe. We're a new tribe, and we need, you know, we need people. We're gonna do what the Dua did, or what the people who started the Igbo, the Shiraks, the Dingo, the Maasai, the people who started this stuff. You know, we made them up. We made them up, right? And of course we have to come around and put our heads together and think about what language are we gonna speak. You know, are we gonna speak Swahili? Are we gonna speak Medunetra? Are we gonna speak Meroitic? Right? What is our common ethic? You know, right? And the thing is that if you don't want to be Ankobia, if you don't want to be associated with me, whatever, you could say you're Coromantee. You can say the Coromantee were the people who made up most of the Maroons. You get what I'm saying? This is what the what Zungu called them. They said Coromantee. You know, but even this, real talk, you could just join a tribe that's already existing. Nationalist organization already exists, Yoruba, Igbo, wherever. But here's the thing: that the reason why I want to create a tribe and have a common ethic amongst that tribe is because we need our people to be anti-white, and unfortunately, a lot of the tribes today are not. But we need our people to be anti-white, and that right there is really the essence of it. And we need, and the thing is that when we practice, when we have the tribe, we can have our taboo foods, if you will, or we can have, you know, we patronize ourselves first and foremost, or we celebrate ourselves first and foremost. So we are exclusive first and foremost. We're about our people. We're open to our people. We're Pan-African and all that, but but it's also a way to identify who we are first and foremost. You get what I'm saying? Because the Ankobia, and what the name even means is that the Ankobia are, when you read the book, you'll see that we are the best soldiers, if you will, for the African race. You know, because I'm writing this third book. You know, where I'm gonna, like, for instance, I just started up on this quote by Thomas Sankara. He says, you know, people without a political education, a soldier without a political education is a potential criminal. And then when you look at the 4 stages of African consciousness, you realize that 2 of those stages are criminals. 2 of them are full bona fide criminals, and the other one, the third one, is a potential criminal. You understand what I'm saying to you? So saying you're on Cobia, because that's the reality with our situation. That the reality is that a lot of African groups, a lot of people in our community are against the pro-black agenda, or against our people having power, our people being empowered. You know, a lot of people would stop you from doing harm to your enemies. A lot of our people would celebrate the disassembling of our weapon system, or even, you know, snitch on you if you were developing a weapon system. You know, that's the reality. The reality is that we need a political education, and Ankobia, you know, represents that political education. So that right there is an idea. Now, again, it's going to be organic too. You know, it's going to be organic, as to say that it might not necessarily be, like whatever the Yoruba used to be, you know, with Oduduwa walking around and talking around, whatever, right? It went through its own life. You know what I'm saying? Because one thing I picked up on when I was studying the Akan people was that even when they assume the role of the Abasam, they have habits and preferences that reflected the times available. So they might like Dutch cigars or something, or Arab fezzes, you know, something that you wouldn't expect, you know, the Abasam, the timeless Abasam, to want. But that just represents the corruption and perversion that could happen over time to a people. You get what I'm saying? Even in their sacred spiritual traditions. So, you know, so there might be splinter groups down the way. Who knows? But the reality is that the creation of tribes for our people to protect ourselves based off of the principles that we understand, something that we want for progeny, is something that we've always been doing. It's the solution that's always been in our face. You know? So right now what I'm saying is that I might need to redo my website. Because I'm saying, look, you ask me what my nation is, my nationalism is, what's my nationality, what's my tribe, or anything, you know, I'm going to be on Cobia. And I encourage you to be on Cobia too. And look, you could be on Cobia and Yoruba. For now, you can be 2 groups. But understand that, because I need you to be loyal to your tribes. You know, whatever your tribe is, I want you to be loyal to it. You should find another tribe and be loyal to it too. But understand that we have to be principally about our survival. You know, and so you can take that knowledge, bring it back to the group for survival, but mainly also turn away from anything that is turncoat. Turn away from anything that is of the lower stages of consciousness, if you will. You know, so if they're allowing, because there are some groups in Africa today that would have white that would initiate white people into their group. You get what I'm saying? And a lot of times, you know, that's something that like a lot of the knowledge that we're privy to, for instance, is because some white people were initiated to the groups. But that right there is the problem. That right there is the problem. And of course, you know, on the one hand, that makes you know that there's a lot of knowledge that we're not privy to, because a lot of people aren't initiating white people. But another thing you have to realize is that there are a lot of people who are initiating white people, and they are a problem. Notwithstanding the benefit that it brings, you know, to people like us, who might not have a chance to go there, right? But here's the point. It's on Cobia time, okay? And the solution was in front of you the whole time, right? One of the models of the Concobia is going to be strategize, or one of the models of let's say our organization, if you will. We're going to call it an organization, but we're a group of people. We're a group of people. But the idea is this: that you have to have as a model, even if you want to go be on Cobia and in your own tribal group, whatever, or you want to find a tribal group or whatever. Understand this: you have to strategize, technologize, and organize against Africa's invaders. And as far as the language question is concerned, whether because again the tribe thing is more important because it's not about getting the whole race to speak one language. Because again, no one race speaks one language anyway, right? The whole idea is that your tribe, your nation, speaks a certain language. But again, a situation that you have to understand is this: that you can bring language to any group of people. All you got to do is, when it's time to give them their pay or their currency or whatever, you just tell them the currency in your language, and they got to learn it. They're gonna pay somebody to translate it, and that person is gonna take the whole check, and they're gonna have to learn it and not get another translation. You get what I'm saying to you? No, but seriously, the idea is that we have to come around to what language will we speak, and it don't have to be one language, because like the word on Cobia is from the Akan people, right? But on top of that, you might say Kata Wakatha, which is Swahili, right? You might say Ankh Uja Seneb Neb, right? Which is the ancient Kemetic, right? So the whole idea is that you could also hodgepodge it, and another way to look at it too is that, let's say, in the future, the Ankobia, a Zulu general, says, hey, look, I could discipline your military, right? I could discipline your military and get your military up to speed, right? He might engage them in the Zulu language. You get what I'm saying? And then those Zulu words come to us, because that's the thing that you have to pick up on, that Africa has a lot of tribes, if you will, like a lot of nationalist groups, and a lot of languages. And a lot of times these languages, they all come from a common root. Like I said, the Bantu, a lot of these languages are Bantu. So that means that there's a Proto-Bantu, that there was a language that the Bantu themselves were speaking, right? Before they spread it around. But then, just like here in America, there's certain accents and certain words that are modified and changed, and then of course regionally the words might be different, particularly if they're isolated. And understand, the Bantu were like isolated over 1,000 years. You know what I'm saying? That the people here in America with their accents and all that, they were isolated. They weren't even isolated, but they were around for like, let's say, a few generations, and they're already sounding totally different. So you're looking at a huge continent with huge interactions with different people and different yada yada. But the idea is that the language, the language could be a hodgepodge, because the language is a hodgepodge. The language has a common root, Proto-Bantu, if you will. You get what I'm saying? But transformations and linguistic transformations happen all the time. You get what I'm saying? But the main thing is that, like I said, the solution's in front of you, and what we need to be is the Ankobia. And the Ankobia got to say, look, we're going to focus on strategizing, technologizing, and organizing against Africa's invaders. Follow me on social media. Follow me on these platforms that you can hear me from. Download them too. Okay, download them. Play them at functions, at public functions. Have conversations with people around these podcasts. Get together, have listening parties. Instead of doing Netflix and chill, you could do pro-black perspective and chill. You get what I'm saying? Let's just do more pro-black perspective, right? But anyway, like this, share it, subscribe, and reach out to me. Send me more pictures of the book. Send me more pictures of you in the book. Send me more pictures of you purchasing the book. Send me, let people know that it's important to listen, subscribe, read, because we're doing something new. We're doing what our ancestors did. When we say Sankofa, go back and get it. This is what we mean. Our ancestors made pan-African nationalist groups. Today you know them as tribes, and white people don't want you to associate with tribes. Right? You have the opportunity to do what your ancestors did. Create a tribe. We could get a tribal ethic. You get what I'm saying? Because we were talking about the limp-wristed nationalists the other day, and you were saying, look, real talk, a lot of people are scouting, or a lot of people are traitors. You know what I'm saying? And if they're traitors and all that, we not about them. But then the question is, how do you know who you're about? And we got to go back to what our people do traditionally. We say, look, I'm messing with my tribe, but my tribe is open to you, and if you come into my tribe, I mess with you too. But our people are saying that because we are under the impression that tribe is following the ancient ways, and is a way to keep us survive, and it's a political, economical, cultural, and ethical system that works, and it's intelligent, it's smart, and it's ours, and all that, and we could do that again, and who knows, maybe we can do it well. That's really the objective, But mainly, the focus I want to say is that we have to focus on the part of our ancestors that were against these invaders. Okay? Like, we have that, because King Delany was impressive, making all these manufactures, making impressive gold, he was the grand marabout before he was the king. He was elected. All that's beautiful. But why is this white boy in his company in 1790? And again, you can look at this with the other people. This one mathematician, this white mathematician was talking about how he was initiated, in order that he could learn more about, African, a certain mathematical concept that's popular in Africa, right? So, but he was initiated. Who's initiating him? Why are these people initiating him? You get what I'm saying? Why don't we understand? And the thing is that, we once got it. So we have to go back to that. And we don't have to be the Ankobia. We could be the Kenesu. We could be the Cushitic. Whatever it is. But the reality is that we have to go back to a way of life, a way of thinking, a way of us being a tribe, like the people in the know, being a tribe that is open to recruiting new people and initiating people into the tribe. And that's something that we don't understand, that initiations were initiations into a tribe. We think it's initiation into adulthood. We have that confusion. We're like, oh, now you're an adult. No, you're an adult by virtue of age, if you will. Who cares? Whatever. Who cares about that? The reality is that you're initiated into the tribe to be a functioning member of the tribe. You're let in on the tribal secrets, the tribal knowledge, tribal wisdom. But thank you so much for listening. I don't know if my energy is a little off. I'm sick. I'm recovering from being sick. But definitely follow me on social media if you want to know. If you want to engage me on this, if you want to engage me at all, just reach out to me. I'm there for that, and definitely read this book, and I'm trying to write this other book, but let me know that you need it. Let me know that you need it. But until we speak again, Shem Em Hotep. Right? That means I go in peace. Ankh Uja Seneb Neb. Ankh is life. Uja is wealth, prosperity, if you will. Seneb is health, and Neb is like mastery. So I wish you mastery of life, prosperity, wealth, and health, right? Yes, Seneb is health, right? Seneb, Neb, Amen, Ma'at, Dua Necha, So I mean, you should understand that one, right? But all right, send me a motap. Thank you for listening. I invite you to join hands with your brothers and sisters as we recite the African affirmation together. It's a call and response, so follow my lead. We are an African people, robbed from our homeland, robbed of our names, our languages, our cultures, our religions, our womanhood, our manhood, our sisterhood, our brotherhood, our motherhood, our fatherhood, our selfhood, our nationhood, and our self-respect. But we shall rise, never to fall again. Up, you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.